Minori Nakahashi is a girl whose life had been destroyed by magic from a young age, but from this tragedy came a new purpose for her: to keep innocent people safe by hiding the existence of magic from the masses. This is a mission that leads her to the magic club of a local high school, where three girls, all with their own different insecurities and emotional baggage, practice what they believe to be magic. Can Minori fulfill her life's purpose and keep these three away from the dangers of magic? Or will her time spent with the members of this magic club change her outlook on life and magic as a whole? This is Kiss the Demiurge. Hello everyone, Noah Novels here, and for today's video, I will be reviewing the visual novel that tells a story of magic and mental health known as Kiss the Demiurge by Studio YuriEureka. Kiss the Demiurge is Studio YuriEureka's first visual novel, and it was released on December 2nd, 2022. Thank you very much to Studio YuriEureka for providing me with review codes to this visual novel. I love getting to talk about visual novels, and being trusted with a copy of one to review is not something I take for granted. In this video, I will be doing my best to discuss my thoughts on Studio YuriEureka's first visual novel, and if it is worth your time, all while staying as spoiler-free as possible, so you can best experience the story for yourself should you choose to give it a read. With that all being said, let's talk about the story of Kiss the Demiurge. Magic is real, and it's quite dangerous at that, with most ordinary people who decide to dabble in true magic ending up dead or causing the deaths of others. This is what happened to Kiss the Demiurge's main character, Minori Nakahashi, when she was a child. After making a deal with a demon and losing control of her magical abilities, she accidentally sent her mother to another realm where demons reside, known as Makai. With her mother gone and father absent from her life, Minori is raised by her grandfather, and she grows up to become an agent of the UMI, the Universal Magical Inquisition. UMI is a secret organization dedicated to keeping humanity safe from magic and demons by hiding their existence with agents who have already succumbed to magic, such as Minori. When a fire breaks out at a local high school due to a student making a pact with a demon, Minori discovers the school has a magic club dedicated to mastering the ways of the occult, consisting of three members: the self-proclaimed leader Akane, the shy fortune teller Chitori, and the elegant spirit medium Tomoko. The magic practices these three indulge in are harmless enough, but Minori makes it her new mission to gain their trust and destroy their love for magic before they can unlock the deadly true nature of the dark arts. But as she begins to learn more about each of them, will she be able to remain steadfast in her mission and beliefs? Or will her entire worldview and outlook on magic be flipped on its head as her relationship with each of these club members changes? This is the story of Kiss the Demiurge. Kiss the Demiurge is a dramatic Yuri visual novel with three heroine routes. The plot summary I have just provided being the basic premise and setup for the common route, which takes up about the first hour or so of reading, I'd say. After which, you are presented with a choice of which club member Minori will focus on befriending, and that is whose route you will end up on. So let's talk about the common route and the writing overall for the story. Kiss the Demiurge has a really unique and compelling premise, but it is underneath a pretty good-sized pile of fast pacing and jarring writing. Let's start with the main character herself, Minori, a person whose existence is dedicated solely to her mission of hiding magic and keeping the innocent masses safe. She doesn't really value her own life, viewing herself as more of a machine that needs to carry out a task rather than a person with a noble goal. This is a self-inflicted mindset she takes as punishment for her accidental banishing of her mother to the realm of demons when she was a child. That being said, a lot of the time she just thinks and acts in ways that I'd expect from an average high school character. Like she gets flustered, she makes jokes to herself, all that good stuff. But then one line of dialogue after she does those things, she goes on to say, "But I am a filthy sinner desecrated by magic who will never enjoy the pleasantries of everyday life." And it's very jarring. It's like we're being told one thing about her character while watching a different character act in the story. And I do get the idea that emotions or impulses, especially that of teenagers, is not something one can easily switch off. So the idea of Minori grappling with everyday desires or behaviors isn't inherently a bad thing. It just needed to be handled better. And I don't necessarily know how, I am not a writer, but as it is, it's like the story wanted to have a brooding and serious protagonist, but also have a regular high schooler who gets into shenanigans and can bounce off other characters in an upbeat way. And that sort of thing can work, but you have to do something with that dual nature and struggle between mission and personal feelings. This story really didn't do that aside from reminding us every few minutes or so that magic is for degenerates and Minori doesn't deserve a normal life because of her indulging in magic. And then it's right back to whatever chicanery the story has cooked up. This problem I have with the writing stays throughout the entire visual novel, even as drastic changes occurred in Minori's characters, beliefs, and relationships with all the club members throughout the 3 heroine routes. And this is certainly not helped by the other issue I mentioned earlier, the pacing of the story. Things happen so fast in this story. During the common route, it's less egregious, because you get the feeling that Minori doesn't really want to be there in the magic club. She's just there because of her mission, obviously. So us speeding through things is almost like a representation of Minori trying her damnedest to figure out what's up with these club members, and how to get them to stop practicing magic as quickly as possible. But this persists even into the character routes, and this is where the fast pacing really takes its toll. You learn so much about these characters, especially Minori, as the story progresses, and you just have no time to process it. Not just stuff like insecurities or past trauma, but there's content contained in these routes that changes the way you look at this entire visual novel. And characters just accept all this information as gospel in 1 or 2 lines. The things they learn or do are things that can fundamentally change who you are as a person, and all it takes is one quick scene for that new information to become accepted as the new norm, and the story goes on as usual. And that's not the only issue, because the rushed nature of the writing relates to the character development and resolution of conflict as well. Now, credit where credit is due. I do think that Minori's character growth is still handled pretty well despite the fast pacing of the story, but the heroine routes are a mess. Not only are they fast paced, they're a bit formulaic to be honest. Minori starts befriending one of the club members, spoiler stuff I won't discuss happens, Minori learns of said club members' traumatic backstory or emotional baggage, Minori tries to help said club members with their troubles while also beginning to develop romantic feelings for them, progress is made, and the route finishes way earlier than it feels like it should. Having predictable story structure isn't necessarily a bad thing. After all, visual novels are a medium of storytelling that have been around for quite some time, so it's not like every new title is gonna reinvent the wheel. But when this same-ish structure is used to convey a story that doesn't feel like it's hitting nearly as hard as it could be, it's disappointing. How Minori befriends the club members and is pushed to learning more about them, while rushed, is handled really well. But it's when the route starts trying to focus on the heroine overcoming their issues or insecurities do things really start to go downhill. There's a lot of similar feeling scenes where the same things we know about the characters and their problems are repeated just in slightly different ways. This goes on for a bit, some progress gets made, and the route ends. And that's another thing. The ending to all these routes are so sudden. Like, to be fair, the character arcs and major source of conflict are resolved, but it all happens so fast it's like it's sneaking up on you. And the endings aren't bad, they're satisfyingly fitting for the characters. It just feels like it should have taken a little longer to get there, and also like the story could have shown a bit of what happens afterwards. Which is a shame, because with some tweaking, I think these endings could be really powerful, but as it is, they're alright. It's a little weird to be reading what feels like a normal scene where Minori, say, I don't know, is walking to school. She just so happens to run into the heroine of the route, they share a meaningful conversation, and boom, the route ends. But I did still take enjoyment from them, mostly. A couple other nitpicks I have with the writing is it can sometimes be repetitive and cliché. The cliché part I'll get out of the way because it wasn't a big issue. For the most part, I can genuinely say the writing and story direction to this visual novel was able to keep me guessing. But every now and then, the visual novel would indulge in some predictable tropes or lines of dialogue. And I don't want to get so nitpicky that I start throwing out specific examples and lines of dialogue, but at one point a character says, "Pinch me because I must be dreaming," or something along those lines. I might be paraphrasing a bit, and I rolled my eyes pretty hard on that one. A cliched line here and there isn't the end of the world, and sometimes overused tropes or lines can be used in engaging ways, but when paired with the jarring writing I've been talking about, these instances stick out pretty bad. The last thing I have to criticize with the writing and story is how repetitive it gets with the heroine routes. Now, I already mentioned how the routes could be formulaic, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. A really big piece of the story that's crucial to developing Minori as a character happens in all 3 of the heroine routes, and it's done in the exact same way, or with the most minuscule of differences. And parts of it you can blast through with the skip function, but it's a problem when the heroine of your route starts to get involved. Because even when Minori is saying and doing the exact same things, even when the heroine of any specific route is reacting in the exact same way as another heroine did in a previous route, you cannot skip any dialogue involving the heroine of your route. Because even though they can sometimes be saying exactly the same thing as a previous heroine, it's technically a different scene because it's a different character interacting with Minori. And it's such a slog. Not to mention, it feels kinda cheap, Like, you can keep the core of Minori's situation the same, but when you have 3 different characters all respond and act in nearly identical ways, it makes what they say feel like placeholder dialogue. Why not use the unique traits and strengths of each individual heroine to craft varied and compelling scenes regarding what Minori goes through? It can all still have the same outcome, but this way every interaction in these routes would feel a lot more authentic and heartfelt. But anyways, going forward there's more examples of this, but they're less egregious. How Minori reacts to what happens to her and how her development proceeds does change a little depending on the route she's in, but it all boils down to more or less the same story beats, just in slightly different ways. And that's fine if you really want to focus on the heroines of these routes, but in the end, I just wish these routes stood out a bit more with how they paced and structured their story and character development on Minori's part. Also, I know I said that would be the last thing, but I just remembered something else I want to mention briefly, sorry. And that's just that there is a lot of typos or awkward phrasing of dialogue in this visual novel, more so than the average Noah novel's review script. I definitely think at least one more proofread was in order because the typos and odd word choices further accentuate the previously mentioned flaws with the writing. Now, I know a lot of what I just criticized could sound nitpicky or small in the grand scheme of things, but the problem is that all these things add up. The fast pacing might not seem too bad on its own, there's something to be said for a story being concise after all, but when you pair that with Minori's inconsistent and jarring writing, especially in the common route, it sticks out. Same for the formulaic structure of the character routes. Having a set structure for conveying a story isn't inherently bad, but when you add on repetitious scenes and dialogue across all 3 routes, you start to notice these things a lot more. And all these issues feed into each other for a story that feels awkward and, I'm really not trying to be mean when I say this, but unfinished. But I am a person who likes to start with the negative before hopping into the positive. Unless it's Chaos Head Noah, give me those positive delusion triggers, baby! So what did I like about Kiss the Demiurge? Well, despite my quite lengthy rambling on its issues, I liked a lot in this visual novel. Going back to Minori as a character. Her writing is inconsistent and jarring, as I've already said, but her motivation of trying to keep people away from the dangers of magic creates a genuinely compelling conflict for her as the story progresses and she becomes closer to the members of the magic club. She knows from her own past just how destructive magic can be, but can she really bring herself to hurt these seemingly good and normal people who are trying to make their lives better or more fun through the use of magic? I love stuff like that. And when Kiss the Demiurge leans into that, especially in the heroine routes, it's some of the visual novel's best stuff. I really felt for Minori, and her conflict between her mission and the club as the story went on was a highlight of this visual novel. And while it does get repetitious going through more or less the same development for her in 3 different routes, the way she changes throughout Kiss the Demiurge's story, and how that leads her to interact with the heroines of the individual routes is good stuff. And the story overall is really mature with how it handles sensitive but important topics. This is a spoiler-free review, but I am going to mention some of the things covered in this visual novel without saying who they apply to, but if you want to avoid even hearing that, skip to this timestamp. Things like suicidal ideation, collective bullying, survivor's guilt. These sensitive topics are handled with a lot of care and tact in Kiss the Demiurge's story. Sure, they can be buried underneath a pile of fast pacing and awkward dialogue, but I really respect the effort taken to shed light on these topics in a meaningful way. It's not easy talking about heavy topics like these in stories, and I've seen quite a few stories try and fumble the bag. So I wholeheartedly mean it when I say good job to Kiss the Demiurge for crafting emotional and meaningful stories that deal with these issues. And as someone who struggled with some of the things covered in this visual novel, I am not telling you all what specifically, I still need to keep an air of mystery about me after all. I can say these issues and how they affect people are well represented in the story. Not that you need to personally relate to something to understand it's well written and thoughtful, but just figured I'd put that out there. Another thing I like about this visual novel is it has a good sense of humor to it. It's hard balancing heavy topics with humor well. One thing that comes to my mind right away as doing this well is the new Has-Been Hotel show, which I am in love with, and don't listen to what people saying. It's not a show that relies on just swearing and vulgarity for shock value. There's genuine merit and thought to its story, and the music is so good, and it's becoming my next hyper fixation, and I should not spend $50,000 on an AMV of it. Don't let me do it. Oh, and a visual novel I reviewed a while ago called Gloom and Doom, but Kiss the Demiurge has some genuinely hilarious moments in its story. Sometimes the humor can come off as a bit childish or try-hard, but there's some great situational comedy at play here. Sometimes the best comedy can come from tragedy, And Minori's awkward character writing sometimes helps sell the comedic beats of certain scenes and stories. I love me a good story that can balance levity with seriousness, and Kiss the Demiurge does so pretty well. Lastly, the heroines themselves. The Magic Club consists of 3 characters, Akane, Chitori, and Tomoko, all of whom get their own route. And they're all pretty good characters. I would say the weakest is Akane in my opinion. I didn't really get much emotionally out of her route. Her character does have struggles and development, but I don't know, it didn't really click for me. I'm not sure if it's because I couldn't connect or relate to the topics discussed, although I'm typically pretty good at getting invested in any sort of emotional stakes in a story. Or if I was still getting used to Kiss the Demiurge's fast-paced and awkward writing. But still, in the end, I didn't feel much. I'm sure someone could get more out of her route and character though. Chitori's route was a noticeable improvement though. I was really able to get attached to her character, and the way her and Minori changed throughout her route was really satisfying. One element of her route is really out there for a visual novel though, and it's not necessarily bad. I just wasn't expecting to see something so modern and topical in this VN, but the times be a-changin', as they say. Tomoko's route was easily the best in the visual novel in my opinion. The pacing is still very fast, but it felt like a lot more care was put into the structure of the story and how the characters eventually reached the conclusion of their development. Of all the routes in Kiss the Demiurge, Tomoko's feels the most thematically important and emotionally resonant with how both her and Minori change. Minori and Tomoko also just complement each other really well as characters, and their eventual romantic chemistry feels the most earned. For the most part, I would say Minori's eventual romantic feelings for each of the club members feels natural, but with Tomoko it just feels the most right. I know it might not be fair to place any route above another when a visual novel doesn't have a true route, but if I had to pick a route that embodies Kiss the Demiurge's strengths the best, it would easily be Tomoko's. The last thing I have to say before wrapping things up for this portion of the review is the handling of information throughout the 3 different routes. While there is sadly a lot of repeated information and dialogue in certain parts, credit where credit is due, there is one specific element or plot point that gets expanded on nicely throughout the different routes. That's part of the fun of visual novels after all, having different story routes come together to form one cohesive narrative, and Kiss the Demiurge does understand that to some degree. Sadly, there's also some things that I feel like are unresolved in the story, and I can't help but wonder what could have been if we focused more on those elements instead of repeating a lot of the same story beats over and over again. But I did enjoy seeing the different heroine routes build off one another. It does help in making the visual novel feel at least a little bit cohesive. So overall, is Kiss the Demiurge a good story? And I feel like answering that for this particular visual novel is a lot more complicated than the standard affair. It has many issues that I've already talked about in depth. Jarring writing, fast pacing, repetitious story beats that makes the plot feel monotonous. Overall, and again, I'm not trying to be mean, but it almost feels like a rough draft or a proof of concept rather than a finished product. And despite that, there's genuinely so many good things in this visual novel. A unique and intriguing premise, great conflict between Minori's mission and personal feelings, a story that takes some really surprising and well thought out turns, and an overall graceful handling of sensitive and important topics. This story has so much going for it, but it's buried underneath poor execution throughout its entire runtime. But I'm the kind of guy who can see and appreciate the good in a story despite the bad or sloppy elements. And to be honest, I am a little more forgiving of titles such as these made by indie studios, as opposed to disappointing visual novels made by big companies that have more budget and staff. The people making these sorts of visual novels are likely just individuals with a passion for storytelling, doing all this work in their free time away from work and whatever else they have going on in life. And as someone who also has a passion for storytelling, I just want to see writers and storytellers thrive. But that doesn't mean these titles are immune from criticism, or that I'm going to go easy on them. Because how can anyone thrive without proper feedback and criticism? Not that I'm some sort of master of writing whose opinion should be taken as gospel, but I would like to think in my many years of consuming various forms of media and writing reviews, that I have gotten a good sense of what does and doesn't make a good story. I've kinda gone on a tangent here, but all this is to say, I'm not going to go easy on smaller visual novels such as this one, but I am going to view it through a different lens than I would a big budget visual novel made by a studio like Frontwing, for example. I'm a lot more keen to tear into Island and what I perceive as its many flaws because that was made by a studio with vast resources, whereas this was made by people who are just earnestly trying to tell a story for people to enjoy and take away meaning from. So my criticisms, with this or any indie VN, never come from a place of malice. I don't get some sick satisfaction from tearing apart anyone's genuine attempt at expressing themselves through creative means of storytelling like visual novels. I'm just laying out my honest and unfiltered thoughts because I want to see people who are passionate about what they do succeed, and one of the most important things for that to happen is constructive criticism, and I want you all watching to do the same thing for my videos. If there's anything that rubs you the wrong way or you think could be better, please say so. Not just because commenting boosts my channel in the algorithm and I am eager to make you all pawns in my virtual game of chess, but because I also want to get better, not just at video making, but my other passions such as voice acting and filmmaking. I've gotten some comments with feedback and criticisms in the past, although admittedly not a lot, and I really do appreciate those comments and take away a lot from them. Sorry for that rant. I feel like in the past I may have gone easy on certain titles, because I either got review codes for them and I didn't want to offend the studio I received them from, or I was subconsciously thinking about how it was made by a smaller group of people as opposed to big budget VN studios. And that's not fair to the people who made those visual novels, or you guys watching my videos who are looking for genuine opinions and critiques in order to figure out if you should pick up a certain title. So this little tangent not only relates to how I view Kiss the Demiurge's story, but is also just here to hold myself accountable. Sorry to Studio YuriEureka for using your visual novel to preach about my stance on critiquing media made by different studios and groups of people. Okay, getting back to the actual review at hand. So, is Kiss the Demiurge's story good? I really feel like it depends on the person. If you're the kind of person who can wade through a lot of poor writing and breakneck pacing, I think there is a lot to appreciate in Kiss the Demiurge's story. But in order to see the good it has, you have to wade through a lot of awkward and mediocre writing, and that's not gonna work for everyone. So if you can trudge through some bad to see some good, I do think Kiss the Demiurge's story is worth it. But if not, I wouldn't recommend this title. I said it before, but the story to this visual novel feels like a first draft in serious need of revisions and tweaking to its pacing and structure. But this is a finished product out on the market that you have to spend money on to experience. So I will now stop dodging the question, is the story of Kiss the Demiurge good? And objectively, no, I don't think it is. There is a lot of good stuff in there buried underneath the bad, and I see the potential for greatness. But as it is, it's a mess. I may have personally enjoyed this visual novel story and think that if you don't mind going through a lot of messy writing, that there's a lot of enjoyment to be had, but I can't in good conscience call a mess objectively good. Let's discuss Kiss the Demiurge's artwork and overall presentation. The artwork to Kiss the Demiurge is not great. I will say though, this janky and simplistic art style did become charming to me over time, but that's just me. Objectively, this is not easy on the eyes. And while the story is obviously the most important aspect to any given visual novel, fitting or appealing to look at artwork does go a long way in immersing you in the story. And Kiss the Demiurge doesn't really have that. The character sprites, I don't know how to describe what makes art good or bad, but I do think the actual designs of the characters are very good. I especially like Chitori's outfit. They're simple but reflect the personality of the characters well. It's just the actual quality of the sprites themselves. I don't know. I think it's the faces specifically. They just look kinda goofy, which makes trying to take any important or emotional moment in the story seriously a challenge, unless you're like me and get attached to the art style. Also, there's just not a lot of variety with the character sprites, so you're gonna be seeing a lot of the same few stock expressions and reactions over and over again. For the most part, it's just Minori and the club members who have dedicated sprites, with any other characters being silhouettes. There are like one or two exceptions to this rule, which I guess makes those characters stand out more, but overall, I just wish we got more variety and quality. I do think Minori has the best sprites in the VN though. I really like how you can tell how tired and desperate she is through them, and since most of her character sprites are either neutral or angry looking, it makes it stand out all the more when we get a smile from her. It's a cool bit of character building, and even though it's rough, I do think her various character sprites do a good job at conveying her various emotional beats throughout the story. I just wish the other characters received the same treatment. The background art, similar to the character sprites, is not very good. It kinda has this watercolor painting look to it. I'm not sure if that's the right way to describe it, sorry. And I've seen visual novels go with that style before and have it work well, but in this VN's case, it just looks like colored in scribbles. I do think an art style removed from the usual anime look of most visual novels could have worked well for this title, but this style for the background art was not the way to go in my opinion. I will say though, there is actually a decent amount of detail for the actual settings of the backgrounds, and even if I don't think they look good, this level of care and thought put into the characters' surroundings does go a long way. There are some CGs in this game, and they're mostly really good, so much so that it's jarring. I wouldn't say they're as great as the CGs in Atri My Dear Moments, for example. Sorry, Frontwing is just on my mind a lot lately because they're the developers of the upcoming Revue Starlight visual novel, which I am so excited for. but they are well-drawn pieces of artwork in a style that feels fitting for the tone and atmosphere of Kiss the Demiurge's story. There's really only one CG I think doesn't look good, and even then, it still stands above most of the other artwork in this visual novel. It's honestly so jarring when they come up, but it's a welcome surprise, and it makes certain standout moments of each route's story even better. They are few and far between though, with Akane's route only having one, and Chitori and Tomoko's route both having two, if I'm remembering correctly. I certainly wish there were more, but I am grateful for the CGs in Kiss the Demiurge. The soundtrack to Kiss the Demiurge is honestly good. I think it's all stock music, but I don't hold that against the visual novel. So long as said stock music is fitting and used well, that's all that matters to me. And this visual novel does a good job utilizing its selection of tracks to provide scenes with the proper emotional weight. I do think sometimes certain tracks run too long or bleed into other scenes, which can cause a tonal whiplash if the next scene is doing something drastically different than the last. This visual novel definitely could have benefited from more definitive scene breaks and transitions, and I think switching music tracks would have helped with that. But yeah, I really don't have any major faults with the soundtrack to Kiss the Demiurge. The sound design to this visual novel? Honestly, I'm drawing a blank. I have nothing to say. I can't really think of anything that stands out on the top of my head, which I guess means nothing stood out to me as egregious, which is a good thing. It also means that nothing stood out as particularly great, but it's possible I'm just forgetting some things. The UI is very generic, but it functions and is pretty easy to navigate, so it does its job. The text box and font for the visual novel is very basic, which isn't inherently bad, but I do think a little more stylizing based off the visual novel's look and feel would go a long way in making this feel more like a complete package. Same goes for the options and menus. Basic color scheme and text that isn't eye-catching but is easily readable, so I can't complain. And your options or preferences are about what you'd expect. I just think this very basic presentation with its UI sticks out a lot more with the already rough look of this visual novel's overall art style. And I think customizing the menus and UI more would have helped mitigate how unfinished the visual novel looks and feels. Again, it's all functional, so there's that. There's really only one thing that bugs me, and that's the lack of a CG gallery. I know I said there aren't a lot of CGs in Kiss the Demiurge, but regardless, I do think having a CG and music gallery should be the standard for visual novels. So overall, the UI of this visual novel is underwhelming but inoffensive for the most part. You have plenty of save slots, a backlog, preferences to mess around with the CG gallery being the only thing missing. Let's begin wrapping things up for this review. So overall, with Kiss the Demiurge, you have a visual novel that's rough in every aspect. The story and writing certainly has its strengths, but they're overwhelmed by poor execution and pacing. The art is mostly just not good, to be honest, and the overall presentation, especially with the UI, leaves a lot to be desired. So what do I rate Kiss the Demiurge? An earnest visual novel that genuinely has a lot of merit but doesn't fully live up to its potential. I'm really not going to try and make this a habit going forward, but I'm actually going to give this visual novel 2 scores. The first being my personal enjoyment score, and the second being my objective score. So, I personally enjoyed this visual novel enough to give it a 5.5 out of 10 for the unique premise, interesting characters, and graceful handling of heavy topics. Objectively, I rate Kiss the Demiurge a 3 out of 10. You can buy Kiss the Demiurge on Steam for $6. And if you're like me and are able to enjoy the good aspects to something even if there is a lot going against it, I'd say it's worth the price. It's around 11 hours long according to Visual Novel Database. I can't really use my read time on Steam as a reference since I started and stopped it a few different times while trying to read it on my Steam Deck, and I do think certain aspects to Kiss the Demiurge's story merit a reread down the line that can give you a fun new perspective on it. Now on to the Who is Best Girl segment of the video, and the best girl of Kiss the Demiurge is the main character herself, Minori Nakahashi. Not only does she have the best set of character sprites in the visual novel, she's the most compelling character of the whole cast. Her backstory and motivations are genuinely compelling and lead to some great conflict and emotional moments in the story. And I really do like characters who are visibly tired, and Minori looks like she's in a constant state of exhaustion, and you know what? I get that. I really do. All that is why Minori is the best girl in Kiss the Demiurge. Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed my review of this visual novel. For anyone who has played Kiss the Demiurge, what did you think of it? Did you agree with my score? And what are some of your favorite indie-developed VNs? While for the foreseeable future I do plan on focusing on my Science Adventure series review marathon, I am always looking for good indie VNs to give a shot and bring attention to. Some of them don't get the love they deserve. And although I'm not like the biggest YouTuber out there or anything like that, I do like to think making reviews on them for this channel brings at least a little more attention their way. And obviously I just like talking about visual novels in general in case it isn't obvious. And for anyone who hasn't played Kiss the Demiurge, I hope I did a good job going over my thoughts on this title and helping you figure out if it's something you'd be interested in. And Studio YuriEureka, if you are watching this video, Thank you once again for providing me with a free review copy of your visual novel. I hope I didn't come off as too harsh, and I am genuinely looking forward to whatever projects you have planned for the future. I really enjoyed my time with Kiss the Demiurge, even with the problems I talked about in this video, and I can't wait to see whatever you do next. I would be honored to receive another review code to your next project, but if for whatever reason things don't work out that way, thank you for this opportunity in the first place. Keep doing what you love, and I only have one request. Please include another bonus section for your next project with the characters all goofing around and chatting about the story and what happened in it. I love that sort of thing. Higurashi did it really great, for example, and I like getting to hear personal messages from the people who made a visual novel to the readers. I love seeing a genuine connection between author and reader, and I don't know, I really like that you did that for Kiss the Demiurge. As always, thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and want to see more content from me, primarily being visual novel reviews and anime-related content like my ongoing Review Starlight video series, please consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already and checking out some of my other videos. And to those of you who are already subscribed and continue to tune into my channel, thank you as always for your support. And lastly, thank you to the great editor of this video, OtakuBox. A link to his channel can be found in the description, and I highly recommend checking out some of the cool content he has to offer on his channel, such as his most recent video as of recording this, where he goes over the recent anime, The Yuzuki Family's 4 Sons. Thank you again to everyone for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Huh? What's that? The organization is making their move? No, my plans haven't been set in motion yet. Noah Novels has yet to serve his purpose. I need time. Give me, until the end of the science adventure video series at least. Okay, you'll try? Good. The lies will be unveiled. I promise. What happens afterwards? Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Goodbye for now. L. Sai Kungru.